It is my pleasure to introduce Seth Barnett. Seth Barnett is a generational expert and a proud millennial. He is currently employed by BPAI, which is the Promotional Products Association International, as their diversity development manager. So for you millennials, I want you to understand, they just make this stuff up. They just found a good man.
That's true.
Put him in position.
I really did just make that up. That's not a lie.
He makes his own rules now.
True.
Check out his shoes.
It's true. These are my dress shoes.
He's a big boy now. His role is to be an advocate for the industry's future marketplace. Barnett develops new ways for business to meet the growing demand of a diverse workforce and changing buyer market. Seth has an impressive academic resume. It says here on his LinkedIn page, it says Johnson & Wales University, he studied management there. Walden University, some public administration. University of Oxford, behavioral economics. And American Public University, law. Now, it didn't say he graduated with all these degrees. But, yeah, man, this guy's very educated. He's currently married to his girlfriend, Jenny. He lives in Fort Worth, Texas, and he drives a Harley. So I give you Seth Barnett, Reaching the Millennials.
What an intro. What an impressive intro, Jim. Wow. I think we can all go to lunch now. Well, thank you guys for having me, and especially thanks to Jim for having me out today. This whole idea of generational diversity is new for the association, and it's really new for this industry to tap into. And I wanted to give you, before we get started, a little bit of background on the reason why I'm allowed to have this conversation with you. And I've been in this industry and have been with the association for over 3 years now. I was their chief lobbyist for 3 years. And this idea developed out of me going to Expo year after year and looking around and saying, our industry is not getting younger. We're not doing enough to bring in the younger generation. And actually, this time last year, last May, our board of directors got together and they said, what are we going to look at strategically for our industry over the next 5 years? And they came up with 3 topics. The number one was globalization. Our industry, our marketplace is becoming more global, and what can we do to meet the challenges of a global marketplace? The second one is technology. How is our industry integrating technology, and what can we do to better help our members integrate technology into their business? The third one is generational demographics, and how is the generational marketplace changing so our businesses are having to update and advance? And that was the one that really stuck with me, and I said, we need to be taking a better look at this other than just having a conversation at our executive level. So I presented this idea of us challenging ourselves to start to look at generational diversity to the board of directors, and they said, absolutely, go tackle this. And so me doing that is presenting this information to you. Part of that is the research and the background that goes into this information. Now, I want to say that what I'm going to address today is not purely opinion-based. There are some things that are based on public opinion that I'm going to kind of try to bring down, but a lot of this is data-driven. We at the association have done extensive research over the last couple of years, but very much over the last 5 or 6 months to drive some of these ideas forward. So much of this is data-driven. So I just want you to keep that in mind, that it's not necessarily that I'm coming to you saying, hey, the millennials are great, we don't have to do anything, you guys need to change everything. No, there are certain ways that we're going to take these steps together. And remember, this is only step one. There are so many steps ahead of you. This is very much the tip of the iceberg. So how many in here, of those of us that are in the industry, how many of you are either a one-person operation or you have up to 5 employees? Okay. How many of you have 5 to 50 employees? And what about 50 or more? Okay, so we've got a mix of everyone. I'll say that if you are a one-person operation, a lot of this information about attracting, engaging, and retaining millennials isn't necessarily for you because you're not hiring employees. However, I will say that the information is really critical to doing business in a younger marketplace. If you can understand the millennial mindset and you can understand ways that we can bring us all together, and I'm going to talk a little bit about how we can all be inclusive of one another, then you can better approach this new market. So I just want to put that out there, as there's a lot about bringing in and retaining millennials, but it certainly goes to the same degree of trying to reach this new marketplace as a whole. All right. So diversity and inclusion. Now, diversity is so many things. What we're going to talk about today is generational diversity primarily. And the reason why I put and inclusion, diversity is actually the way that what is unique about all of us, the way that we're all differently unique. And the diversity that we all have is completely different from one another. Inclusion is the way that we actually work together, the way that we can cohesively work in a community together. That's primarily what I'm focused on. Diversity is the exclusion. We're saying this person's diverse because of X, this person's diverse. Millennials are diverse because of their cultural society. Baby boomers are diverse because of theirs. What we're talking about is not alienating one another. We're talking about including everyone. So do me a favor real quick. Think about it this way. You've got a backpack sitting on a table. Into that backpack, I want you to put everything in it that makes you diversely different than someone that you're around. That's everything from your background, your education, what you do as part of your business, how much money you make, what your ambitions are, all of those things that make you uniquely different from someone else. Put that all into a backpack. Now think about it this way. Whenever you go to work, on the very first day of work, whether you're working by yourself and you're working in a market, or you're working in a group that's 12, 15, 50, 500 people, you bring that backpack to work with you. You put that on your back and you bring it into work with you. Now on that very first day, you're not going to come in and dump out everything on that's in that backpack on the table. You're not going to say, that's me, that's how diverse I am, that's all my fears, concerns, challenges, ambitions all out on the table. No, as you progress in your career, you're going to take one piece out at a time. You're going to take something out because you feel comfortable sharing it with somebody else. You're going to start to talk about your family. You're going to start to talk about your ambitions, your goals, your hopes, your dreams, your wants, and your needs. You pull all of those things out as you progress in this job. Now, as you do that, your table starts to become cluttered with these things. Now, think about it this way. If you've got a staff of 5 to 10 or even more people, and they're all doing that, and they're all putting those things out on the same table, all of those things are going to have to interact at some point. We can no longer be individually diverse. We've got to be open to the idea of other people's diversity. And that's what inclusion is. So those challenges that present from a generational standpoint are unique to that person individually and their generational society. So as we start to develop these ideas, just remember that. Remember, if you've got somebody that's a challenge at work because of they're in a different generation than you and you just don't understand them, that's okay. That's a unique diversity. What you need to do is challenge yourself to think about how can we then include that person. Start to think, as we address those things, start to think about what culture looks like to you. And the idea of culture changes. If I were to ask everybody in here to define culture, they would define it totally different. That's okay. But think about what that means to you and what that might mean to somebody else. And as we start to think more about inclusion, then you start to develop culture. So who's heard of the story of the peacock in the land of penguins? No one in this room. Wow, that amazes me. And here's why. The story of the peacock in the land of penguins has been around for decades. It's been used in workplaces to show people how different aspects of diversity impact your workplace, but how it's important to accept those different impacts. So the short story of the peacock in the land of penguins is, there's a company, a good company, a structurally sound company, a company that's protected against its competition, that's completely full of penguins. Now, all these penguins look the same, they all dress the same, they all act the same, they think exactly the same. So one day, a peacock comes in, Perry the peacock comes in and says, I want a job here. And the penguins say, oh, you look differently than us, you act differently than us, you think differently than us, but you know what? We'll give you a chance. We'll give you one chance and we'll see how it goes. So Perry starts working, and as he develops his career there, one of the penguins comes to him and says, you're doing a great job, and everything you're bringing to the table is really cutting edge, and we're really impressed with that. But he offers him up a penguin suit. He says, but you know what? You don't look like us, and we're trying to go after an image here. You need to be able to look like the rest of us. So he tries to get him to look like a penguin. And Perry says, you know what? That's not me. I'm an individual. I want to be unique. So I don't want to put on the penguin suit. So Perry's frustrated, and he leaves this compound of penguins. And when he leaves, he notices that their perimeter fence is starting to be attacked by wolves. Now, the wolves in this case are the competition. The competition is beginning to move in on him. He runs back to the penguins' compound and he says, wait a second, something's wrong. The competition, the wolves, they're getting closer. They're starting to close in on our compound. They're going to attack us. They're going to take all of our ideas. The penguins say, no, that's impossible. We've done the same thing every day since we started this company. We've kept competition out every day because we've done things the exact same way. And Perry says, well, maybe that's not what you need to be doing to move forward. Maybe now competition is starting to move in on you, and you need to listen to how I'm unique and how I'm different and challenge yourself to be forward thinking. So what I want to point out in this is that this was developed in the 1950s. This Perry the Peacock is the millennial generation. That's Generation Y. The penguins are everyone else. The penguins are who are afraid of change. Now, maybe that's you, maybe that's not you, maybe it's somebody in your organization, maybe it's somebody that you've done business with, but the fear of change is going to not allow for progressive growth. So think about that, 1950s. This is at the time, in the 1950s, the baby boomers were becoming the new challenge. The things don't change. We're all in this progressive idea of especially of generational diversity. All right, so I want to take just a couple of minutes and really thank all the young folks that are here that came out today to be a part of this. And I want to give you a little bit of background on who we are and what we do. So, yeah, you've walked around and you've seen promotional products and you've seen some of Jim's work, and maybe you've talked to some of these folks that are in the industry and said, okay, well, they're in the product business. But I want to shift your mindset a little bit. These folks are in the marketing and advertising business. Do they specialize in products? Yeah, absolutely. But it's more than that. There's more to this. And some of the things that I wanted to point out is that the fact that we are in the brand association business. And I don't know how many of you are distributors and you talk to your customers about the brand association business, but I want to give you a little bit of background on that. So the brand association business, and I wrote this down so I didn't forget. The brand association business creates an image upon the association with a known commodity. That's what we do. That's what the promotional products industry is. The known commodity is the product. The brand association is how it's imprinted. Now, brand association, there's so much, and if you've taken advertising or marketing classes, you know that advertising goes deep into psychology and the ways that we see advertisements and what it triggers in our subconscious. That's all promotional products. That's all marketing. That's all what these people do. Brand association is about connecting people with those certain brands, those certain marketed items, whatever it may be. And what's great about this industry, and I know that a lot of you can speak to this fact, is that we're a cost-effective industry. We're actually, out of advertising, we're the most cost-effective industry. We have the highest rate of consumer, what am I trying to say here? Cost per impression. We have the highest cost per impression, the lowest cost per impression, the highest return of our cost per impression than any other advertising arm, which says a lot. But not only that, it's the retention of information. And that's what's always triggered me. This industry has the ability to share information that's being retained by people more than any other piece of advertising. So when you combine that idea of not only are we cost effective, but we can also help to sell a brand better, it's a win-win. And what I wanted to say for the folks that are either joining us that are not in the industry or those of you that are from the high schools and colleges is that this industry is really about trying to be forward-thinking in marketing. It's cutting edge, it's different, it's creative. And we'll get into that a little bit more, but I just wanted to put that out there to say that as much as those of you that are in this room identify as promotional products people, you're so much more than that. And even the conversations that I've had today, they continue to change and update and challenge my mindset to think of you more as marketers first. I mean, that's truly what it comes down to. So let's talk about this generational shift. And this is what I was joking with Jim about, that he kind of stole my thunder. And yeah, absolutely, the generational shift has already taken place. The millennials have taken over. Generation Y is now the majority in the marketplace. They took over, and in fact, coming down to a date, they took over March of 2015 is whenever that shift actually took place. We will continue to see that progression grow. We will continue to see Generation Y, or the millennials, grow into this marketplace. In 10 years, and I don't know if you know this, but in 10 years, the U.S. marketplace will be 75% millennial. 75%. That's the largest generation to hold one single spot in our economy ever. So for those that think, this is just one more thing, well, it's not. Your market is changing. The people you sell to are changing. 75% of those that are going to be in your workforce, 75% of those that you're going to do businesses with, 75% of end users in 10 years are going to be this younger generation. And they will actually hold that spot longer as the majority than any other generation. So not only do you see things changes, but you'll see these things changing, but you'll continue to see these developments. But I'm not saying that to scare you. I'm just saying that it's coming, it's out there. We've just got to ensure that we're all taking this first step together to ensure that our businesses are grounded. So millennials, so if you type into Google, millennials are, it comes up with, millennials are the worst, they're lazy, they're stupid, they're entitled. Anybody agree with that? So, Jim, of course Jim does.
It's on Google.
It's got to be true if it's on Google. It's on the internet. One of the biggest challenges of any generation-to-generation communication are stereotypes. And this sort of stereotype is definitely harmful to these young folks. But it's also very, very harmful to you and your business. Because if you think, well, they're just stupid and entitled, I'm not going to do business with them. But guess what? Your market is going to shrink and shrink and shrink and shrink until it's non-existent. This isn't true. I mean, yes, I said I wasn't going to have too much opinion-based. That's opinion-based. It's not true. There are those out there that are those challenges, that create those challenges for us, that are entitled. But I always tell people whenever they say, oh, millennials are entitled, I said, well, 15 years ago, we called that ambitious. And that was a good thing. And now being ambitious and wanting to do so, I want to go out on my own, and I want to do my own thing, and I want to leave my own mark. Well, now you're just being entitled. Well, no, the baby boomers are the ones that started that. It was ambition. Let's harness that ambition. Figure out how we can tap into that ambition. And real quick, I just wanted to touch on, there's in the late 90s, there were a couple of economists who got together and they said, we're dealing with all of these generational challenges and we deal with them again and again. We dealt with them with the baby boomers, we dealt with them with Gen X, we're dealing with them with Gen Y, Gen Z is coming next and they're going to be a huge challenge. But what are we looking at? Why do these present new challenges every time a new generation comes into the market? So what they did is they went back through history and they looked over the last 500 years. Now, we've only been identifying generations since the turn of the 20th century. But what they did is they went back and they looked at different generations that are in the market at the same time over the last 500 years. And what they found was very interesting. They found that there are always 4 generations in the market at one time, 4 characteristically different generations in the market at one given time. That's no different today. It's going to be no different in 100 years from now. There will be 4 generations. What they found is that these 4 generations all have unique characteristics that then cycle back to the first generation. So, to give you an example, the unraveling generation would be like the GI generation. So the very first generation that we've looked at since we've started to really identify generations, The unraveling generation, the generation that came from great economic prosperity all the way down to economic collapse. And so what they became is a civic generation. They went out and became civic-minded. The next generation is the generation in crisis. So you think about the 1940s, into the 1950s, into the 1960s, war, right? Crisis generation. They had to define themselves differently than any other generation. The high generations are the ones that come off of that prosperity that's built after a time of crisis. In this case, the high generation is the baby boomer. These are the ones that went into the market and said, I'm going to leave my stamp, I'm going to build my own house, I'm going to create my own destiny. That's the high generation. Then the awakening generation are the ones that learn the challenges of the ones before it. So in this case, it's Generation X, learns the challenges of the baby boomer generations and said, those mistakes that they made getting into the market, I'm not going to make those mistakes. So they're the awakening generation. And then we come full cycle. The unraveling generation, yet again, is the millennial generation. It's Generation Y. They came from a time of great, tremendous economic prosperity all the way down to economic collapse. The year I graduated from college was whenever the economy fell out from under everyone. I was telling somebody today, the first several jobs that I took were for next to no pay. That was because you had to get out into the market. Think about that, graduating from college whenever there were no jobs. I was competing with people twice my age for the same job. So, again, we were the unraveling generation, and now we're looking at the next generation, which is Generation Z, into crisis. This cycle can be looked at through history over at least the last 500 years and has been repeated over and over again. Why I'm saying that is that we sit here today and we can learn what's coming ahead. We know what's next because we know what the tendencies of these generations are. So again, I mentioned that the unraveling generation of the turn of the century, the GI generation, became a civic generation. These are the folks that created a lot of the nonprofit, charitable, and foundation organizations that are still in existence today. They looked at this time of economic collapse and they said, we never want to see poor people again. We never want to see homelessness again. We never want to see poverty at all. So then they created all of these organizations. They became this generation that was going to pull people up from the ditches. That's the exact same as the millennial generation. This is a civic-minded group of people. They want to help in society. They want to be plugged into the community. They want to be a part of something better than themselves. And that just goes to show what their history is, what they've come from, what they've seen. The turmoil that they've seen around them helps to deliver who they become. So who is the millennial? Now, I put 1982 to 2000 with an asterisk next to it because anything you read, there will be different dates. There's some people look at 1980 to 2005. It just depends. There's no right or wrong answer. There's nothing defined that says here's who the generation is. What I've done is whenever I started this position, I went and met with an economist who specializes in generational economics, and I said, what is the right answer? And he said, you know what? You need to go with 1982 to 2000 because those are the most definitive points. And the reason for that is you look at 1982 was a huge growth and prosperity, and then 2000 was right before chaos broke out. So those are kind of the windows there. So everything that I talk about, all the research that you see here, any research that you see from PPAI in this area is talking about Generation Y coming from 1982 to 2000. So I want to give you a couple of little facts about this generation. And again, to try to mitigate the stereotypes and talk about what are the positives that we can bring out of this. So like I said, 75% of this generation will be in the market in the next 10 years. 94%, so nearly all, do not support the traditional economic model. So what's a traditional economic model? That's the way business is done from the very first point of contact to the very last point of contact. They don't support the traditional model. That's okay. That comes with technology integration. It comes with globalization. The world is shrinking. The way we do business is different. We can now do business in different markets all over the world without too much of an added cost. Technology is changing. The way that we access information, the way that we access business is changing, and that's okay. But if you're not utilizing technology and you're not figuring out ways to tap into your market or to tap into those that are you want to attract into your business, you need to start to think about that. Start to think about the ways that the millennials are challenging the economic model. It doesn't mean that it's wrong. It just means that that's the way things are progressing. Something critical, especially if you're somebody that either has millennials working for you or you're somebody that's going to be hiring millennials in the near future, they expect, one of the key things is they expect their personal life to take precedent over their professional life. I can absolutely attest to this. I want my personal life to take priority over my professional life. It doesn't mean I'm not willing to work. It doesn't mean I'm not willing to challenge myself at work and to be there when I'm told to be there and do all the best that I can. But at the end of the day, I want to shut it off. I want to go home, be with my family, not check my emails, not have people calling me. And I realize that sometimes that's not the way that business works, especially in this industry. It's okay if sometimes there's an exception, but you've got to be open to allowing for personal life to take precedent over professional life. Sometimes that means including the personal life in the professional life. Maybe there are opportunities for you and your staff to get involved with your family staff. Bring everybody together. Remember, don't exclude, try to include. And also another critical point, 66% of the millennial generation will switch careers at some point in their life. That's the highest of any generation, and I think it's great. That means for you guys, 66% of you will switch careers at some point in your life. I'm one of those. I've switched careers 3 times in my life. It's the way that things are done today. It's the way we don't go. My parents were ones that graduated from college, they went and got a job, and they sat in that job until the day they retired. They didn't have to like it, but they sat in that job until the day they retired. That's not the case anymore. Why? Because there are options. Remember, the world is getting smaller. The marketplace is growing. The changes are out there. The challenges are out there to get the millennials to say, I can do whatever I want. I mean, you think about this industry. Think about what we can do in this industry. You don't have to be just a salesperson. You can be somebody that's involved in graphic design. You can be involved in manufacturing. You can be involved in logistics. So many different areas of choice and option that may not have been there at one time. That's okay. But the reason I say that is that you've got to strive to create a workplace that's conducive for the millennials to be at for a very long period of time, because they do have choices. They've got options. So one of the things that I did whenever first creating this whole idea of how are we going to start to challenge ourselves to look at this idea of generational diversity was to start to minimize those stereotypes that are out there. And to start to tell people that what society says as a norm for this generation, just like what society has said for other generations coming into the market, may not necessarily be true. So for example, society describes the millennials as impatient, they only seek fame and fortune, they're impossible to work with, and they're entitled. Okay, that's what society says, and that's okay. That's okay that that's out there. For those of you that are millennials, don't let that deter you. It's okay. So what I did is I went in and I asked a group of college freshmen, I told them, I said, here's what society thinks of you. They think you suck. What do you say to that? And remember, these were college freshmen, green behind the ears, didn't know what they wanted to do yet. So I asked them some of the things that came out. For example, on I only want fame and fortune, somebody said, I don't want to be famous, but I want to be remembered for what I do. That's a pretty bold statement from a freshman in college. I don't want to be famous, but I want to be remembered for what I do. That's the fame and fortune part. A long time ago, whenever the baby boomers were coming into, well, not just the baby boomers, all these different generations coming into the marketplace, everybody wanted their piece. Everybody wanted something to have that's their own. Baby boomers took that a step further. Baby boomers were the ones that said, I want to put a stamp on something. I want my mark left. So that statement about I want to be known for what I've done That came from the baby boomers. That's something that we learned from the baby boomer generation. Did you know that there are actually more businesses, companies, foundations, organizations, trusts named after baby boomers than any other generation? And I'm talking like 5 to 1. That's that, I'm going to put my stamp on something. I don't know what it is, but I'm going to put my stamp on it. Millennials have that too. It just comes in a little bit different package. But again, it's misunderstood as, I just want fame and fortune. Oh, they just want to be famous. No, but give them an opportunity to leave their mark, whatever that may be. So another couple of things I wanted to point out is that the top 3 things that millennials say, so in a survey that was done, and this is a national survey, it's done by an HR group, they reached out to the millennial generation, to different areas of the millennial generation, those that are working, those that were in college, and they said, how would you describe yourself? And the top 3 things that this national survey came back with is, they want you to know that they're hardworking. Well, I read an article from PPB a couple of months ago, and I put that in there. I put that they're hardworking, and somebody called me, somebody that's very prominent in this industry, and said, I disagree. I don't think they're hardworking. And I said, well, who do you have working for you that's a millennial? Well, I don't. Okay, how do you know that they're not hardworking? Hardworking just comes in a completely different package. Remember, they want their personal life to take precedent over professional life, so hardworking just comes a little bit differently. Hardworking for those of us in an older generation may say, well, I come in early, I stay late, I'm here on the weekends, that's hard work. Is it? Or is that just more work? So for the millennial generation, hard work means I'm going to come in this window, I'm going to work really hard for you, I will do all I can if you support me in the fact that at the end of the day, I want to go home and be with my family. I will give you hard work. The number 2 was loyalty to employers. Now that contradicts the 66% of them that are going to change careers at some point. But loyalty to employers comes with, if you're able to provide a workspace that remember, engages and interacts everyone, including the millennials, then they'll be loyal. There's value, there's more value placed by the younger generation, there's more value placed on your culture and your workplace than on the dollar they receive. First generation that's happened in. There's more value on that. If you provide a good, safe, fun, engaging workplace, and even if I don't make as much money as I could at XYZ company, I will stay with you, I will be loyal to you. And they're also people savvy. Now, people argue this because they say, well, no, they're not. They're disengaged. Always on their cell phones. They're always on their tablets. They're always on Facebook. Again, that's just people savvy in a different way. Whenever this survey was done, one of the comments that somebody made was, how are you say I'm not people savvy? I do business through Facebook. They connect with their clients through Facebook. There's nothing wrong with that. They're still connecting with their clients. They connect with their